It's all about beauty.
Oh, everybody talks about the most perfect beauty ratio.
This mathematical formula is actually cited to help explain why some people are considered beautiful and others are not.
Research has actually showed that across all cultures and ethnicities, the closer the proportions actually approach that golden ratio, the more beautiful they are perceived.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome your hosts of Skinterviews, the expert series, George Skandalis and Nathan Strom.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to another episode of Skinterviews, the expert series. I am George Skandalis.
And I am Nathan Strom.
Yes, you are. How are you, Nathan Strom?
Well, I'm good after my second, maybe third, maybe fourth costume change because apparently I wasn't matching with you today.
I know, well, and you know, these are the rules. It's in the contract. Well, I wouldn't feel so bad for you. We need to up our viewership, ladies and gentlemen. So everybody in the audience, I need you to cheer really loud so that everybody at home tells all their friends to watch because look what's happening. Budget cuts. I don't get a jacket. I don't get a shirt.
And I don't get a belt.
I'm barely wearing a bra.
For the first time in my professional career, I'm not wearing a belt because
Do you think we could tug those down or are they going to stay up?
because someone said that it's like fashionable.
Well, listen, Nathan, it's all about beauty and what other people perceive as beautiful. So somebody might look at this right now and say, wow, he looks beautiful, right? I mean, I think you look pretty handsome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, if you weren't married with kids, I'd be hitting on you. But you know, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. When we talk about beauty, it's how we perceive it, what we think is beautiful. So it is really in the eye of the beholder. But as a man of science, and you wouldn't guess that from my outfit, there are ways to actually measure beauty. And people have tried for years. In fact, one of the earliest studies happened in the late 1800s where they tried to measure beauty. There was a guy in the 1930s that created this machine that looks like something out of Clockwork Orange, where you put it over your head and it measures for symmetry of the face. And where someone was asymmetrical, he would then design products that would help to fix that symmetry. The guy's name, and I'll never get it right, was Maximilian Faktorowicz, I think. Don't quote me on this, ladies and gentlemen. I will put it in the comments so I get it right. I don't want to insult anybody. But later on, well, we might get sued, but I don't think it's about that. It might be for my outfit. But what ended up happening was this guy created a way to measure symmetry of the face and how to correct it, and then came forward and created a line of products to do that. And his products were named Max Factor. And that's been around now since the 1930s. So people have been trying to measure beauty for as long as we can look back in history. And beauty is really important. It helps us to choose a mate. It helps us to perceive the world around us. It helps us to appreciate art. It helps us to appreciate fashion.
So you're trying to tell me to be beautiful, you have to be symmetrical?
No, to be beautiful, you have to be loved by the person looking at you.
I like that.
See, I think you're beautiful, but I think you're beautiful for a lot of different reasons, like the fact that you're kind, you're loyal, you're annoying, but I still stick around. You know, that means I love you and I think you're beautiful. But can we actually measure how people perceive beauty optically in the mind? And one of the things that we look at is always symmetry, just like you said. And one of the big rages in our industry right now is all about contouring, how to contour with makeup to reshape the face. So what we're actually doing is we're creating an optical illusion by playing with lights, by making things look more highlighted and making things look more shadowed. We can create a symmetrical looking perception of beauty. Can we do that though in cosmetic medicine? We're gonna find out today.
Should we ask our experts?
Absolutely. Who do you think is gonna have one of the most interesting answers for this one?
Maybe Dr. McIsaac.
Dr. McIsaac, you know why? she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so is Dr. Guanche. So is Dr. Day.
Dr.
So is
Scott
Dr.
Nicky.
Scott Nicky. So is Dr. Howley. Don't forget the boys. I know you don't swing for my team, but don't forget the boys.
Dr. Hammer's a stud?
Dr. Hammer is a stud. We keep getting those messages. You know, Dr. Hammer, I know you're watching. If you weren't married or if it doesn't work out, don't tell your wife I said so, but we got a lineup outside the studio waiting for you. Again, we want to thank our live studio audience here today. Thank you very much for being here.
guys.
And for those of you that want to be live in the studio and get to see us up close and personal, because we get to meet everyone after every show, go to skinterviews.world and buy tickets for our live studio audiences. Only a few episodes remain.
It's sad, but if you want to see more of us and more of the content we're providing, give us a like, give us a follow on all our social channels, and we'll keep doing this.
So where do they follow? Tell them.
Skin.to-views on Instagram and Skinterviews by Nathan and George on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Perfect. And of course, to catch all our seasons, again, skinterviews.world. Make sure to follow all our experts on their social media handles, and make sure to follow our sponsors, our advertisers, because that is how we're able to deliver content like what you're going to learn today to you. Bring it right into your home. So let's go to our experts and find out about how we measure beauty, facial symmetry, and contouring, and what we can do. Boom. See you later.
Oh, everybody talks about the most perfect beauty ratio, and I really don't believe it exists.
There's some things in life that are hard to measure. Beauty is one of them. However,
Renaissance painters used an equation that was known as the golden ratio, which is 1 to 1.618, to map out their masterpieces. And today, this mathematical formula is actually cited to help explain why some people are considered beautiful and others are not.
they've been able to lay out mathematically what would be considered the ideal balance in terms of measurements, shape, and proportion of the human face that most people, looking at a photograph, would find appealing or beautiful.
The distance between one inner eye and the other, this intercanthal distance, determines your perfect balance. So every part of your face will be either a multiple or a fraction of this distance. And that determines what's called your phi, your perfect balance for facial contouring and symmetry.
And ideally, the width of the eye should be phi to the length of the nose, the width of the mouth, the width of the eyebrow, the height of the forehead, and the distance to the apex of the cheek.
So the golden ratio can outline what the proportions of the face should be.
The face is divided in thirds.
Between your eyes, and then from between your eyes to above your lip, and then from this area down to the chin, and it should be 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and then there's the law of fifths that goes across the face.
The width of your eyes being the guide for the dimensions of the fifths.
You know, what's interesting about this golden ratio is it doesn't mean that all faces should look the same. In fact, many of the world's top models from different countries all exhibit these golden ratios despite significant differences in their appearances.
So we're not talking about the size of an individual, we're talking about the placement. So where the eyes are with relationship to the nose and to the mouth, and then the length of the face and the width of the face.
Research has actually showed that across all cultures and ethnicities, the closer the proportions actually approach that golden ratio, the more beautiful they are perceived.
So for example, if your lower facial thirds is reduced because you have a very small chin or your lower jaw has a very obtuse angle, then it throws your face out of balance.
One that is used not only in beauty and aesthetics, but also in other industries. So for example, some of the most, visibly appealing cars are based on this ratio. And they kind of take this ratio to the extreme and make everything a 1 to 1.6 ratio. And they are some of the most, world-renowned beautiful cars. And so that is also, again, found to be applicable to the human face.
And the concept behind the golden ratio is that beauty is innate and in fact can be defined rather than just in the eyes of the beholder.
I mean, there are studies even looking at, babies and how babies are drawn to the more sort of beautifully appearing figure, person, and so on.
And so a group took a variety of pictures of female faces and asked people to rank them from 1 to 5 based on their attractiveness. And the researchers then paired photos that were at opposite ends of the attractiveness scale as ranked in this survey. And so the photos were then presented to these newborn infants ranging, the babies were 1 to 7 days old, and the photos were shown to them, and they saw that the babies spent longer looking at the more attractive faces, suggesting that there was this innate ability to recognize beauty.
So we have those numbers. And yes, we do use them. Now, I'm not saying that on every patient who I'm analyzing for facial aesthetics that I take out a slide rule and I measure, oh, you need to be 2x or 2 whatever. But in the back of my head, I know those numbers. I can see the graph. So if I put someone on that, mathematical graph paper in my head, and I know that their jaw is wider than their maxilla or their cheeks, then I want to do something that's going to change that balance. So it may not fall right into the mathematical model, but it gives me a template on which to work. It's very valuable, actually.
Having said all that, decoding exactly what makes a face beautiful, I think, is more difficult.
When you look at people who don't have their 5, but we love them and we think they're so beautiful or so cute. They don't have symmetry. Their eyes may be a little bit smaller. They may not be perfectly distributed or balanced, but it has personality. It's what one of my friends called your signature look. Something about a nose that may have a little bump or a little scoop or maybe a little bit off center in a way. But over time, we love that about you. And if you fixed it, you wouldn't quite be you or quite as beautiful. So it's good to know what those balances are as a physician. But in the end, I don't always have to get you to that to make you your most beautiful.
It turns out when we try to meet these beauty ideals as far as measurements go, it doesn't always work out because each face is so individual and there are so many cultural differences.
For example, if you go north to Scandinavia, people have very small noses because it's freezing over there. And if you have a big nose, your nose would be freezing off. You go to south to Africa, it's very hot climate. And so you need something like a wide nose that can let off heat more easily, and you need wide nostrils so you can breathe more easily, just because people back then used to travel on foot a lot, and you need to be able to breathe and get more oxygen. So your facial dimensions are guided by your ethnicity, number one, and are just to be used as a reference, not as an absolute guide.
One of the problems I have with a cookie cutter approach where we talk about contouring is that people go, okay, well, you have the apex of the cheek here, or you put in so much along here, and then the brows are this and the cheek angles. And then you see people with all of these odd contours where, they may have perfect cheeks and a jawline, but it doesn't match their face and it doesn't particularly look good. So for me, it's really having an understanding of the person in front of me. It's having a conversation with them, watching them naturally animate, kind of getting a sense of what they're about. And that, along with understanding anatomy, physiology, the aging process, all of those things will inform the products I need to use, the best way to help restore and recreate balance. And one of the most helpful things is to have them bring in a picture of when they were in their 20s or 30s or in younger years, assuming they're in their 40s or 50s when they're doing this, and sort of see where they started and what their natural balance was. And then it's not that I'm trying to get them to that, but it's trying to understand what they really look like and help them, when I'm done, be able to look in the mirror and say, I love it and I look just like me. That's always my goal, and those are the patients that are the happiest with the work that I do.
The reality is beauty can be more of a gestalt. It can be influenced by so many things, cultures, ethnicities, even someone's personality is said to influence beauty. So I think there's actually a lot at play into what defines beauty.
There's definitely a difference between somebody being beautiful and being attractive. We have some very interesting characters at this practice, extremely sexy, at various ages, can be young, can be, middle-aged, can be even 60s and 70s, and their persona, the way they dress, the way they act, the way they carry themselves is extremely sexy, and yet they may not have perfect features. And there may be other patients that we have that have perfect features and don't have that sexy confidence or the way they move or the way they refer to themselves or others, where you can tell they know they've got it. So there's definitely, they're two different things. And my book, 7 Days to Sexy, talks about how your persona is sexy, your belief in yourself, your confidence, your swagger, the way you walk, the way you cross your legs, the way you make eye contact. All these things are about being sexy, and they're not necessarily tied to looks. The reason why they're tied to looks is because if you feel you look better, then you act more sexy. But one thing people do love to see, consciously or subconsciously, is symmetry. They like to see that eyes are the same size, that they're the same distance from each other, and that the lips are the same size.
It's often been asserted that symmetrical faces are considered more attractive and that there's a biologic reason that people exhibit this preference. And there's been studies showing that this preference for symmetry exists.
The truth is, when it comes to our body, or specifically our face, no one's face is 100% symmetric.
Our eyes actually correct your face by about 15% and make you look more symmetrical.
And if you actually artificially create perfect symmetry, it's actually less desirable, and a slight bit of asymmetry may have that bit of character contribute to beauty.
There's evidence to suggest that when you put one side of the face next to the other side of the face and make it perfectly symmetric, in fact, it looks quite strange. And you can do that both for the right side or the left side. You can even pick the patient's best side and you put it side by side, and it does not look right whatsoever.
There was a huge study done some years ago where they, with computer animation and photographs, took pictures of people and took their face and mirror imaged them. So they took their face, they mirror imaged it, put it over here, so it was identical. And then they took the same face, not mirror imaged, because we all have asymmetries, gave it to a pool of non-experts and said which one is more beautiful.
Over 86% voted for the imperfect ones.
Actually, there's this image that you can see of Beckham. The center and right images are more mirror images of his right and left side respectively. And the perfectly symmetric faces have distorted his appearance. And even when the changes are subtle, they can almost be more disconcerting and not perceived as normal. That perfect symmetry, there's something slightly off-putting with him. Now, David Beckham, I think we can all agree he is handsome in any of the three forms, but most people prefer the version where he's slightly asymmetrical. It's his natural appearance.
So that's just to tell you that perfect symmetry is not necessarily not only not achievable, but it's not necessary.
This is just one example. In some people, the differences are even more noticed when you create symmetry out of their facial features. But I think, in general, our facial structure, our volume varies from one side of the face to the other, and that's normal, and that may actually enhance appearance. So I think overall, it's true that people are drawn to a certain amount of symmetry versus, a high degree of asymmetry. But I think it's also true that perfect facial symmetry doesn't necessarily equate to more or true beauty.
Gisele Bündchen, which back then was the highest paid supermodel. She has a big nose, a long nose, short upper lip, long face. If you were to measure her facial proportions by the aesthetic guides, she would be ranked very low. But yet she's the highest paid model, and whatever she has going on, the harmony of it gives her a certain beauty and charm that people love.
I had a patient who had very asymmetric cheeks, and I offered to address it for her to help her fix it. She was now in her mid-70s. And she said, no, but that's how I identify myself. And I felt so terrible because here was something I thought I could do so well for her. And it wasn't something that she saw as a problem. And here I am saying all these things and then doing the exact opposite. So I felt terrible. And all she wanted was a little filler in her marionette lines. So we did that. And she came back a few weeks later and said, no, I do want the cheek filler. And I said, but this is your identity. This is how you see yourself. It's your beauty. It's you. And she said, no, I looked at pictures and I didn't realize how much it had advanced from where it was. So I don't want you to make it perfect, but I want you to make it a little bit closer to where it was. in a few years ago. So we did some of the filler, and then she looked at her pictures again and she said, yes, that looks like me, I'm happy. So sometimes it's not getting to perfect symmetry, but it's understanding what that balance is, understanding what your patient's needs are.
So let's just remind everybody that facial symmetry does not necessarily create beauty, but beauty can be enhanced by improving balance, proportion, and harmony.
I look at the face as a whole, not as different components. It's a harmony. It's like when you look at a painting or a picture, you look at the general impression, which transfers a certain emotion. So a certain imperfection, whether it is the nose, whether it's the eyes or the cheekbones or maybe a small chin, could make someone look very attractive or give the person the specific charm that we talk about.
For example, if I met a man tomorrow who was a very masculine, man's man, and had a little baby face, right, with cute little cheeks, it just doesn't work. It doesn't go. So with him, having a scar on his cheek and a bit of a rough beard is actually attractive. It suits him. It blends with him.
The imperfection, if it fits in the overall picture and aesthetics of your face, that's going to be, to me, the most beautiful part.
Society places great value in symmetry and beauty, but there's individuality in that asymmetry.
Your imperfections, those little asymmetries that you have, they are actually your charm. They are what make you charming. I mean, we all know Elvis, his asymmetric smile and his lips. There was women passing out when he smiled at them. Obviously it evoked a certain emotion in those women, but then you would say, why does he smile crooked? Well, is it now a bad thing or is it now a good thing, right? So we have to really understand the difference between what's symmetric and what's asymmetric, and then see how the asymmetry is going to be a negative thing as opposed to a positive thing. And that has to do with the degree.
So when someone is so asymmetric that is what's catching your eye visually, that type of asymmetry, I think, warrants correction.
Half of your face is either undergrown or overgrown, and the discrepancy is really significant. Well, that's not pleasing, so that can be treated. But if there's minimal changes, actually treating it might not be beneficial to you.
So if they're telling me that they don't like such and such about themselves because they consider that to be, let's say, a negative attribute of themselves, and the asymmetry is contributing, so for example, one temple being very hollow compared to the other temple, which is going to impact the mid-face and the lower face, in that circumstance, again, I would aim to treat the asymmetry. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetric, but the end game really is to make that distraction go away.
The way the brain works is that we don't like to see a significant degree of asymmetry. I'll give you an example. A patient who's got a depressor labii inferioris out. So that's the muscle that pulls down when you smile. You smile, your lower lip comes down. But if it's knocked out on one side, your other lower lip comes down. It looks really asymmetric. So what do? We actually go and we paralyze the good side. Even though you have a reduction in movement, the brain gets tricked and it sees symmetry and it gets a lot happier and it doesn't notice that asymmetry.
You don't want things to be obvious, and that's our goal. We don't want to measure something to be symmetrical. No one approaches you with a ruler or with a grid. People look at you and they want to see something that's pleasing.
Okay guys, time for another tip. I know you like these, so here goes. Sleeping. There was actually a study that looked at identical twins to see if they can determine what kind of factors associate with asymmetry. And wouldn't you know it, sleeping on your tummy was associated with significantly more facial asymmetry.
It discussed how there was facial distortion that can occur while sleeping, and that can contribute to the appearance of aging. And one effect, of course, is the development of sleep wrinkles. So if you sleep on one side, there's pressure, it can create lines and wrinkles. They also reported that compression of the face during sleep and those mechanical forces at play can also alter the bioelastic properties of the skin and contribute to remodeling of even the epidermal, the dermal matrix components. So all this can contribute to facial asymmetry. And if you sleep on one side more than the other, I think there can be an impact. And certainly as a treatment provider, when I'm looking at patients, I can often tell which side they sleep on more. So while it might not be possible to change your sleeping position, sleeping on your back may, of course, be protective for some of those changes.
One of the most important thing that happens is promoting increased asymmetry, and it becomes more exaggerated over time, is the sun coming in from the left side or the right side, depending on what part of the world you drive in. Years and years of this causes hollowing, volume loss. The temple on that side is definitely more indented over time. There's more lines on the upper lip. There's less volume on the left upper lip. So there's a lot of things we see. They can start gradually in the 30s, 40s, and by the time 60, it's very dramatic, the difference.
So we spent a lot of time talking about symmetry, but I think we have to bring it back to basics, back to beauty. What is beauty, right? Beauty is, of course, cultural. What one person finds irresistible elicits a shrug from another. Some people like small noses, some bigger backsides, some dad bods, and some Captain America. Wherever your desires lie, or wherever you find that beauty is often beyond skin deep. That's what makes us all human, makes us all unique. Beauty is universal, but it's also very personal.
Yeah, there's certainly different attributes that are considered desirable in facial appearance for different people, different cultures, even at different points in time.
If we look at the shape of the brow, for example, the shape of the brow that used to be, in let's say the 50s and 60s, it used to be sort of a curved brow with really not much of an arch, just a sort of nicely evenly curved brow. And then there became a bit of an arch. And even the position of that arch changed over time.
Old times, like the royalty in England, they powdered their faces. They wanted to be as white as possible. They carried parasols and made their skin as white as possible because the people that worked in the fields were tan. Now, if you're tan, that means you have leisure time and you can go on vacation, and the people that are white are the people that are working a lot. So all these trends have to do with our culture, have to do with what's going on, and definitely have to do with who's the beauty icon of the era.
So, for example, a group living in, west coast of the United States on a beach may have certain facial qualities or features that group, that society deems as attractive or beautiful. Whereas if you're living up north in Canada in Iqaluit, those features might be completely different. So you always have to keep that in consideration.
You get used to what's around you. So if you're on Instagram and you follow a lot of people with big lips and big cheeks, that starts to look normal to you, and then you think you need that as well. So what beautiful is and what normal is part of our diet of what we're seeing on a regular basis. And that influences how we see ourselves and what we want to do.
So there are a lot of trends, and as we talked about in a previous episode, how twiggy was the ideal of beauty, and then the waif thin look was in style, then the large breasts and the tan was in style, like Baywatch and all that. And then that's going out of style, and now it's all about the butt.
And I think it's important, first and foremost, to understand a patient's goals. So for example, for some of my patients, they may prefer more of this apple cheek augmentation as opposed to, lateral cheek accentuation, and that's considered more masculine.
The jawline for an Asian woman, a lot of times they want me to put a lot of Botox in and taper the jawline. I have women that go to Japan or other countries and basically shave down the bone of their flared jawline. And meanwhile, many Caucasian women come in and get jawline augmentation. A lot of models, actresses, they want that flare of the jawline. So I'm actually adding filler. So it's ironic to me and interesting that one person comes in to taper their jawline and the other one comes in to fill their jawline. And that happens all day long.
So I think in general, there are going to be trends in beauty, and patients are asking for these trends and asking for us to make them look a certain way. And my approach really is
within a reasonable range. I respect what that person and culturally or individually wants for their face. But
if somebody wants me to make their lips look extremely large, not only if I don't think it fits their the rest of their features or their lip shape, if that's going to sort of stretch out the tissue so much that it really is not going to go back to its normal structure, that's not something I'm going to do for a patient, even if they're asking for it.
I think it takes a really good doctor to help our patients understand that just because you want this doesn't mean it's a good idea. And trying on these fillers isn't like trying on a blouse. Just because they can be erased or they wear off doesn't mean that it's a good idea to do it.
I think what needs to happen with regards to any trend and even any aesthetic treatment really is the more extreme it is, the more guidance needs to be done with the patient around whether it's reversible or not. And the fact that this is a trend and this isn't a traditional approach to beauty, and it's something that may change, and for the patient to understand whether or not that is reversible, because they may not want to look like that forever. Kind of like a tattoo, right? We're all seeing tattoo regret. As a dermatologist, certainly I see that not uncommonly. Our interests change, and we can remove tattoos a lot better than we ever could before. But your tattoo in your 20s is not going to look like your tattoo in your 60s and 70s and 80s. And neither is, the appearance of a trendy fox eye. It's not going to look the same in the 20s as it is later on in life.
So it's really about having that conversation, but there are differences that are from coast to coast and also differences around the world. But now with social media, that's becoming less and less so. And I'm finding that we're starting to kind of all blend, sadly, to kind of looking alike. When you go to places like Dubai or even Iran, like one of the biggest procedures in Iran is getting a nose job and getting their hair dyed blonde. And it's such a pity because Middle Eastern women have such a beautiful exotic look, and now they're becoming more westernized because it's considered attractive because it was considered different. So my hope is we can keep this global exotic sense of beauty and sort of celebrate the different cultures and our own, each within us, unique sense of beauty.
Timeless beauty that you can never deny. And as I did research for my book, 7 Days to Sexy, was universally sought after was smooth, clear, beautiful skin. That is, from every part of the world, a desirable trait. And so no matter what your individual features, nose shape, all these different features, we can talk about hairstyles, the skin being beautiful and smooth is always a standard of beauty.
You guys have heard me talk a lot about highlights and shadows. What does it all mean? You ever been to a makeup counter and see somebody do somebody's makeup? They really focus on highlights and shadows to really create that beauty. So what does that mean? Our face is full of them. So is our whole body. We've got a malar highlight, submalar shadow, dorsal nasal highlight, subnasal shadow, highlight shadow, highlight shadow, highlight shadow. The whole body is a collection of highlights and shadows. And we have to use that contour and those highlights and using light to our advantage because it's really our best friend.
I talk a lot about minimalist skincare and doing less is more, but you want to have fun, and it's about self-care. So I think all those aspects of contouring and shading, I mean, I'm doing some of it for this video. I really love it. I really have found it's like an art. But if you're having problem skin, like if it's starting to give you acne or you're getting redness or burning, you got to dial it down a notch. But if you're not, go ahead, have fun, play. And I think you can do a lot now with makeup contouring that, you can fool people. It's pretty cool, actually.
I have been absolutely super impressed by what makeup artists can do for someone's appearance. I mean, there are makeup artists who can do your makeup, quote unquote, and you will look like you have the highest cheekbones on earth. You will look like you just had fillers, a facelift. All this stuff is quite amazing. This is with a panel, with coloring of skin and texture and playing with shades.
We as surgeons, we can do it with non-surgical and surgical methods, so they have to do less of makeup work and actually look their better version of themselves, even without makeup, just taking advantage of light.
In makeup, what they do is they apply lighter makeup under the eyes and they apply darker makeup underneath the cheekbone to scallop the cheekbone. And we can do that with filler so that even with the person not having makeup on, they look more contoured.
This is really an art and a science, and that you need to see a trained injector who understands anatomy, understands balance, and who will take the time to help you look like the best version of you.
I'm doing facial contouring with Kybella, which is deoxycholic acid. I use deoxycholic acid underneath the mandible in this area to reduce the fat and increase the step off between the mandible and the neck. And that gives a nice, beautiful contoured look. Of course, we do the submental chin to give a more contoured look. I do not use it for the buccal fat pad. That is a procedure that a lot of my plastic surgery colleagues are doing, where they make an incision from the inside mucosa and remove the fat pad. That is something I would caution against unless the patient has a very round face, because over time that hollowing starts to form lines because it's a path of least resistance and it starts to become indented. In a similar way to people that have had jaw advancement surgery, have areas of decreased volume in the area where the bone is thinner, and they start to see hollowing over the years. So it won't show up right away, but it can show up later on. Having said that, there are people that have very round, very full faces that want to contour it by reducing that buccal fat pad. But I don't do it with deoxycholic acid. It does demyelinate some nerves, and I would think it would be too risky to inject it that deep. The most risky thing I'll do is if someone has jowls that are very distant from the marginal mandibular nerve, I will use deoxycholic acid to reduce the jowls.
There is a lot of education. A weekend course is not going to make a great injector. The products are our tools. They are what we use, but it's really the artistry and the science and the studying of the injector that will give you the best possible outcome.
You have anywhere from facial implants, fat, fillers, bone contouring, whether through shaving or actually moving facial bones. You can cut segments of the facial bone, move them in all 4 dimensions and fixate them to where it is for someone that has overbite, underbite, or a shifted upper or lower jaw, a cant, what we call it. So there's a lot of things that can be done.
I mean, these are the kind of things that we incorporate into getting a patient or a client the beautiful look they want. And perhaps it is recommending, hey, you know what? Try some eyeshadow. Try using a little bit of bronzer on your cheeks. All of these things go hand in hand. Because if you can do that, use some fillers perhaps, and balance it, they're going to be happy. But it's a multifaceted world.
But facial contouring is important because people see their imperfections more than they used to, based on the way we communicate today. They want to show their best version. They want to look their best version. They want to feel good about themselves. It has to do with confidence. It has to do with self-esteem.
If I see a photograph of myself, or my buddy shows me a picture that he took of me, or I look in the mirror, we know from science, we know from the physiology of the, right eye goes to the left brain and all this kind of reflective technology and science, that what I see in a photograph of myself is not really how others perceive me walking down the street. It's perceptually and visually different.
When you hold the camera at an arm's length, the center of the picture, the image is increased in size by up to 30%. We studied it. And the periphery is actually reduced. So you can take a selfie, the center, the tip of your nose, mind you, might appear 30% larger than it actually is. And the angles of your jaw, the back of your face will look smaller, so you look like you don't have a jawline or a jaw. Well, if I don't explain that to the patient, we're trying to treat a selfie, not the person. So a lot of times I give them a mirror. I'm like, look in the mirror and tell me what you don't like. Don't show me your selfie. And a lot of times they go like, wait a second. Is confusion.
It's our natural instinct that when we look at ourselves or look at anything, we're really looking for the flaws because those can be signs of trouble. So when you see signs of aging or signs of something not right in your skin, that's really a survival mechanism. And so we're DNA wired, we're hardwired to kind of look for the bad over the good. And so the first thing I do when I give someone a mirror is I go, okay, what do we love about how you look? Let's first see your beauty so we can celebrate it and enhance it. I don't want to take people from more flawed to less flawed. I want to take them from beautiful to more beautiful.
It's a mistake to treat them based on the selfie. to treat them based off of what actually is. You know, I'm not going to correct a lens issue with surgery, because then in real life, the person is not going to look right.
And I know we all have beauty, but I have to see it in them. I have to get it. They have to see it in themselves. And then we have to share that vision to help bring it to life for that patient. And it can be done, but it doesn't mean we're going to erase all the lines and wrinkles, because I don't think lines and wrinkles make people look old. I think sometimes they add character, and the little crow's feet can be sparkles. I don't want them to be fireworks, but they could be sparkles, and I think they make people look and feel happier. So it's helping people understand that and helping to restore those balances without erasing.
Interestingly, more often than others, I have to actually tell patients that I don't recommend something that they happen to come in for. Like someone comes in for fillers, I have to tell them, I wouldn't do filler. I don't recommend it. You don't need volume. You need contouring or you need repositioning of tissues, but you don't need volume. Volume is actually going to have a negative effect.
We have to always look at what our patients want. Some patients really, really desire, to them, beautiful is a robust red big cheek and big voluptuous lips, and that to them is appealing and beautiful. Which I think it's okay to go there, but we still have to stay away from extremes, right? We don't want the giant duck lips and overdone, overfilled. So we can take them there.
You know, what infuriates me the most is when I see people who are overfilled, especially at a young age, because what I realize is that it now changes the trajectory of how they see themselves and what they do next. So somebody now gets big cheeks, and then they say, okay, well, my lips are too small. Now they do their lips. Now they're completely distorted. They don't know what they look like. And all they do is now have a dependence on the injector because they have to keep filling up. And they're afraid that they're going to wake up one day and it's going to be all gone. So they keep adding more even when they don't need it. And for some reason, there's always someone willing to put another syringe in somebody's face. I don't know why. I mean, saying no shouldn't be that hard, especially to patients where you can see they're already overfilled. And then over time, they just are never happy because they don't look like themselves, and they keep thinking, I just need to do this one more thing or this one other thing.
I don't think anyone out there could give me an example of where an extreme, with respect to what we're talking about, is a good outcome or a good feature. I would love for you I challenge you to show me an extreme and show me the beauty. I don't think they go hand in hand. It's about harmony. Whether your face is round or whether your face is V-shaped, it doesn't matter. It needs to be balanced and not extreme.
My hope is that we're trending back to that. And I'm encouraged because I'm seeing a little bit of a backlash against that overfilled look. And a lot of people are realizing that we have to find a balance. And it doesn't have to be surgical, but it comes with a little bit of acceptance that aging can be beautiful and that every decade has its own way of looking beautiful. And it doesn't mean that you have to erase all the lines and wrinkles.
Thank you for watching another episode of Skinterviews, the expert series. Again, today we learned a lot about beauty and how we perceive it. We think you're all beautiful when you watch our show. That's just how it goes. And we want to destigmatize beauty. Don't forget that really beauty is up to you. What you define beautiful is different. What I may define beautiful, what Nathan defines beautiful. There are some commonalities to beauty, I would say. Like, I think there's not a person in this world that wouldn't think you have beautiful eyes. Right?
I think you're pushing it a little bit. But
Well, no,
I'll take it.
I want people to think I'm beautiful because I say nice things.
But I think that's the great part of our world, isn't it? And that's why you can catch us on skinterviews.world.
Absolutely. And we want you to remember this when closing. Beauty really lies in the imperfections. What makes us beautiful is what makes us different. If everybody looked the same, how would we decide who's more beautiful and who's not, and where we can improve and what we can do to make ourselves look and feel different? Because being different, being unique, is probably the most beautiful thing you can do, other than being yourself. I want you all to go check out a talk, an amazing TED, it's called TED Talk, but TED Med or Med Talk or TED Med, I don't know what it was called, but the guy's name is Dr. Arjan Chatterjee, and he gave this amazing talk on beauty. Go look it up, Google it, find out. I wish we could have gotten that expert for the show, but I think our experts did an amazing job in defining what we think is beautiful. We think you're beautiful here today. Thank you
Stay
so much.
beautiful, everyone.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you on the next episode. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye, beautiful.
Take care.
Woo!